She said it with a smirk. Not cruelty, not malice, worse. Casual dismissal. Oh, he's just here. Like I was a coat rack. A footnote. Background noise to her polished rise. We were standing in the middle of their marble-and-glass mausoleum of a housewarming party. Her new firm had just relocated their regional HQ. Her new boss, the one with the gelled hair and permanent smirk, had just finished a speech about vision and velocity. Investors milled around, sipping wine that cost more than my suit. And when one of them, a real estate guy with a Rolex tan, gestured at me and asked, "Is this your husband?" She laughed. Loud. "Oh, he's just here." And just like that, my marriage turned into a punchline. I didn't say a word, didn't smile, didn't flinch. I set down my drink, nodded like I was going to the restroom, and walked out the sliding doors into the night. The lawn was lit by little solar lamps. Her voice echoed behind me, something about synergy. I could still smell her perfume in the cool air. I pulled out my phone. One number. No hesitation. "It's time," I said. My attorney, Rich, answered mid-yawn. "Time for what?" "Cancel the acquisition. Citing conflict of interest." A pause. Then, "You're serious?" "She works there now." Silence. The kind where lawyers recalculate numbers in their heads and try not to sound too eager. Rich cleared his throat. Clause 14b. Clause 14b. I confirmed. Let me pause here for a second. Because if you've made it this far, yeah, you scrolling on your lunch break or listening while driving, more than 90% of you don't follow, and I get it, but it really helps the team if you hit that subscribe button. We put our backs into stories like this. So if you're here, stay. Now back to the patio. I ended the call with 2 words. Make noise. I stood there a moment, watching my breath fog in the air, and took in the sharp contrast between their overfunded arrogance and the reality about to cave in from the side. The company she joined, gleefully, triumphantly, arrogantly, was 2 weeks away from finalizing their crown jewel acquisition, a logistics optimization platform that was going to revolutionize their entire backend. Automate dispatch, eliminate loss, forecast fuel expenditure to the hour. The platform I built, the platform I licensed, under strict transfer rules, and the very platform now frozen in place because my wife, in her rush to climb the ladder, forgot that ladders only work if someone holds them steady. I walked back to the window. Nobody missed me. She was laughing again. Her hand brushed her boss's sleeve. He smiled. Too close. Too comfortable. It hit me in that second. Not just the betrayal, not just the disrespect, but the performance. She had rewritten the narrative of her life, and I was no longer a chapter. I was footnote material, an uncredited cameo. Fine. Let them toast their upcoming dominance. Let her smirk through her story about building from nothing. I was done reacting. No more fighting. Just decisions. Cold. Legal. Final. I turned and walked to the car. While she toasted to synergy inside, I detonated clause 14b outside. By morning, she wouldn't be laughing. By Monday, their acquisition team would be in full panic mode. And the next time someone asked, "Who's he?" she'd choke on the answer. 10 years ago, I was sleeping 4 hours a night and eating whatever didn't require a plate. She was still in school, second degree, different state, and I was knee-deep in warehouse data, building something I didn't even know had value yet. I didn't have a team. I had a laptop with a cracked hinge and a whiteboard covered in overlapping arrows. What I built wasn't flashy. It didn't have a cool name, but it worked. It made mid-sized logistics firms operate like Amazon. Inventory balancing, dispatch routing, fuel efficiency curves, boring stuff to most. But not to the people bleeding money in freight. The software made decisions based on real-world variables like weight, driver fatigue, regional traffic trends, and even weather projections. It wasn't sexy. It was just brutally efficient. And then I sold it. Quietly. Licensing rights only. Retained ownership under an LLC I built specifically for it. A ghost entity that existed for one purpose: to protect the IP and its revenue terms. Clause 14b, the one everyone schemes over, made it untransferable if there was a direct connection between my LLC and any employee, executive, or consultant of the acquiring party. I wrote that clause myself, in a fit of sleepless paranoia. I never imagined I'd invoke it. She never asked where the money came from. Not once. She just celebrated the day Sally Mae stopped calling and posted a selfie with a mimosa caption. MBA, here I come briefcase sparkles. I remember sitting across from her at that brunch. She had on these sunglasses that made her look like someone I hadn't met yet. That money came from the first licensing deal, a 5-year term with a Chicago-based regional hauler. I used the second deal to cover our down payment. The third deal paid for her tuition in full. And still, she never once asked why I never complained about costs. It didn't bother me then. I was proud. I wanted her to rise. But now she works for a firm that just spent 6 months negotiating an acquisition they think is clean. I watched their keynote 2 weeks ago, CEO talking about smart back-end pivots and proprietary routing tech that will become industry standard. They had a roadmap slide. My roadmap, color-coded, stolen from a white paper I wrote 7 years ago. And she joined their product team last month, just in time to be assigned to the integration rollout. Imagine that. Of course, no one in that room knows who really owns the licensing rights. They don't know about the clause. They don't know that under Delaware code, any conflict not disclosed prior to due diligence nullifies a pending agreement and triggers personal liability if damages occur post-implementation. But I know, and my attorney knows. And now, thanks to that one dismissive laugh at the party, the clause that's been collecting dust is about to become a wrecking ball. I spent the next morning combing through our documents. Original license terms, amendments, auto-renewals, email trails, the LLC's P&L. There it all was, quiet, boring proof of ownership. She never saw any of it. She was too busy performing a new version of herself. It's not that I want to destroy her. That would suggest I still feel something. This isn't about revenge. It's about correction. I let her build a tower on my foundation. She forgot to check who still held the deed. Let her boss make his moves. Let her shine in team meetings. They're standing on my architecture. And if they don't step back, Clause 14b will turn their 6-month acquisition into a public embarrassment in 6 hours. The best part? They still don't even know my name. Monday morning, the conference room smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner, an oddly comforting scent, considering we were about to detonate a bomb under an 8-figure deal. Rich sat across from me, sleeves rolled up, glasses perched low on his nose, scanning a stack of acquisition documents like a bloodhound with a law degree. His office was bare bones, no assistant, no espresso machine, just a massive bookshelf full of state codes and a small ceramic frog on the windowsill. He only smiled when something bled. He tapped a page with his pen. There it is. Clause 14b, third line. I leaned in. My own wording from years ago stared back at me in courier font, slightly warped from a bad scan. In the event that an employee, executive, advisor, or immediate relative of the acquiring entity is held, currently holds, or is intended to hold any role related to the licensor's product or its application, the agreement must be formally re-evaluated prior to close. Failure to disclose such connection nullifies this contract and invokes rights of retraction. Rich looked up, one eyebrow cocked. Want to confirm again when your wife on board? Last Thursday, I said. They announced it on LinkedIn. Thrilled to welcome Jessica Est, former product strategy consultant, now joining us as director of platform development. He chuckled. They always brag online before they check for mines on the trail. I slid a folder across the table. Her onboarding packet. NDA. Employment contract. Internal Slack screenshots. She was already involved in the integration team within 48 hours. She's even listed as a stakeholder on their Jira board. Rich exhaled slowly. So, they made her both a decision maker and a disclosure risk in the same week. Amateurs. And they think they're buying my code. He gave a small, admiring nod. Well, not anymore. He picked up his phone and called his paralegal. Elaine, send the formal hold to Hayward and Company. Cite breach of Clause 14b. Conflict of interest due to unreported spousal employment. Effective immediately. Request full retraction. Mark it urgent. I sat back in the chair, hands folded, pulse steady. This was the moment of no return, not just legally, but psychologically. Once Rich hit send, the gears would start grinding. Lawyers would wake up in cold sweats. Slack channels would get renamed. Calendars would go dark. And her name, her smiling, PR-friendly name, would be the keyword that triggered it all. You want me to notify them gently? Rich asked. Or go for the jugular? I didn't hesitate. Jugular. We watched the email draft appear on the shared screen. Subject line, urgent, breach of Clause 14b, immediate action required. Inside, clean language. No accusations. No threats. Just facts. And at the bottom, a line I wrote myself nearly a decade ago. Retraction to be considered formal upon digital receipt. Ownership remains with licensor until renegotiation is approved. Rich pressed send. That was it. Just a click. No fireworks. No screaming. But somewhere, right then, probably, An intern at Hayward and Company was getting an alert they didn't understand. A project manager was seeing a calendar event titled Acquisition Hold, Emergency Call. And an executive in a high-rise corner office was glancing at his phone with that slow, creeping feeling that something had gone very, very wrong. Back in our quiet little room, Rich leaned back, satisfied. They'll try to blame someone. Eventually, they'll trace it to her. And when they do, I said, they'll ask why she never disclosed her husband was the original architect. Which, Rich added, is going to sound especially bad when her Slack messages say your name like you're some failed coder who lucked into an LLC. I smiled, slow and even. It was never luck. He nodded. Domino 1. Now we wait. Except I wasn't planning to wait. I was planning to walk back into our house tonight like nothing had happened. To sit through dinner while she told me about onboarding drama and new software politics. And I'd nod. Maybe even pour wine. Let her talk. Let her gloat. Because the trap wasn't just legal. It was personal. And the only thing more satisfying than watching them scramble was knowing she wouldn't even see it coming until it was too late. She came home that night practically vibrating. Her heels clicked across the hardwood like applause, her coat still swinging off one shoulder as she launched into a monologue halfway through the front door. You would not believe how fast they're moving, she gushed. They already looped me in on the rollout schedule. They said I had natural authority in the room. I stayed by the stove, stirring the risotto. Mushroom, her favorite. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I ladled the broth slowly, quietly. They're calling it Project Tusk, she said, sitting on the kitchen island like she always did when she was in campaign mode. I know, terrible name, right? But the numbers are insane. The CTO told me, off the record, that this thing is projected to reduce ops costs by 38% within a year. 38. That's hundreds of millions. She poured herself wine, didn't ask if I wanted any. That had become routine lately. Small things that once were signals of partnership, now replaced by her momentum. They have no idea what hit them, she said, smiling over the glass. They thought they were hiring a mid-level strategist. 1 week in, and I'm already leading the implementation calls. I nodded. Smart move. She didn't catch the tone. Didn't hear the low hum under those 2 words. Smart move for me. Because earlier that day, while she was busy dazzling half the company, my LLC's legal team had sent a cease and desist to their back-end development vendor. Simple language, highly specific. All implementation, integration, or derivative use of the IP known internally as Platform Tusk must be immediately halted pending legal review of licensing compliance and third-party entanglement as defined under Clause 14b. I could have told her that. I could have stood in the kitchen, tossed her a copy, watched her face go slack. But what would be the point? She didn't even realize the contract her firm was depending on came from our bank account. Didn't realize the man she'd publicly minimized was the same man who'd written the very algorithm she was now trying to rebrand under their corporate banner. She was high on proximity, on titles, LinkedIn buzz, internal Slack applause. That look in her eyes, that was someone who believed she had finally left the old life behind. Me included. You okay? She asked, sliding off the counter and walking over. You're quiet. Long day, I said. She kissed me on the cheek like someone signing off an email. Not really present. Not really seeing. You'll laugh, she added, leaning against the fridge. But you know that software you used to mess around with? The route planner. MHM. Well, it's wild. The core engine of this whole project? It's nearly identical to what you built. I mean, they've refined it obviously, but still. It's like déjà vu weird, right? I let myself smile. A small one. Weird. She tossed that off like it was trivia, like she'd just spotted my initials on a street sign. And that's when I knew I didn't need to raise my voice or make threats. I didn't need to expose her tonight. She was already wrapped around her own rope, talking faster, dreaming bigger, building a public persona that was about to crack wide open. She didn't ask what I'd done that day. She never asked anymore. Not about the LLC, the code base, the name I used in contracts. That was her real mistake, not the smugness, not the ambition, not even the boss's sleeve she lingered on. It was forgetting that silence isn't emptiness. It's storage. I sat down across from her at the table, handed her a plate. They'll love you, I said. She smiled like she'd already won. And across the city, in a different boardroom, a group of very nervous men were now reviewing the cease and desist with pale faces, wondering how they'd missed me entirely. The room was all glass and chrome, floor-to-ceiling windows, polished table the size of a small yacht, bottled water arranged like trophies. She wasn't expecting the meeting. One minute she was drafting integration notes with her team. The next she was being politely but firmly asked to step into Conference A. That's the one they use for shareholders and crises. She knew that. She tried to hide the shift in her posture as she walked in, tried to keep the click of her heels steady, her jaw loose. But the moment she stepped through the door, the temperature changed. The CEO was already seated at the head of the table, hands clasped, mouth a tight line. The COO sat to his right, flipping a pen in slow, methodical circles. Legal counsel was there too, Andrea something, with a red folder and an expression like she'd already written the exit memo. None of them said a word. Her boss entered last. He looked gutted, pale, like he'd just come back from identifying a body. He was holding his phone like it was radioactive. "Close the door, please," the CEO said. She did. Her boss didn't sit, didn't look at her, just set the phone down on the table, tapped the screen, and turned up the volume. "This is a formal notification of contractual breach under Clause 14b, as defined in the 2015 licensing agreement filed by Sentinel Shelf LLC, dated March 3rd. Any ongoing implementation or derivative planning related to the platform, herein referred to as Tusk, must cease immediately. Failure to comply will constitute grounds for legal action, including retroactive penalties under both federal IP law and state-level disclosure statutes." The voice was calm, clinical, but final. She felt her legs go weak. "What?" the CEO said after the recording ended. "Does your husband do again?" She swallowed. He used to run a small tech company. Nothing major. He sold it years ago. I didn't think. Did he ever mention owning the IP behind the software we just spent 6 months preparing to acquire?" Her breath caught. I didn't know it was his." Her boss finally looked up, his voice hoarse. "The LLC. Sentinel Shelf. That's his, isn't it?" She hesitated. Yes. I think so. But he hasn't worked on that in years. He's not involved in this." The COO flipped his pen once more. "You're listed as a stakeholder on the Tusk Integration Board. You approved back-end alignment with his legacy code just last week." "I didn't know it was his," she said, louder than she intended. "No one said it was connected. It was just routing logic. Optimization strings. It's not branded." "Because he never sold it with branding." The lawyer cut in, finally speaking. "We've reviewed the original license. It was anonymized through LLC transfers, airtight on identity shielding. But the math? The structure? That's his. And your name appears on 6 internal memos referencing that implementation as legacy adjacent, which legally is enough to establish knowledge." She shook her head. "No, I didn't think. He never told me." The CEO stood slowly. "You've been married how long?" 8 years. "And in those 8 years, you never once asked where the money for your degree came from." Silence. Her boss rubbed his forehead. "They're freezing the project. Entire rollout halted. The investors are already pinging. Legal wants to run a full compliance sweep, which means they're going to look through every single communication you've had with the integration team, and with him." Her voice was small now. "It was just dinner talk. I didn't leak anything. That'll be for them to decide," the lawyer said. "But I'd advise you not to speak to anyone else about this until we conclude the internal review, including your husband." That last word landed like a slap. The husband, the one she joked about, brushed off, the one she referred to just 2 days ago as just here. Now he was everywhere, in their servers, in their contracts, in their legal liabilities. He'd made one silent call, and everything started crumbling. And she finally realized something she should have remembered long ago. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He just had to wait until the glass cracked. The press release dropped at 8:14 a.m. sharp. Strategic acquisition suspended pending review. Due to unforeseen contractual complexities, our integration of Platform Tusk will be temporarily paused while internal and legal assessments are conducted. We remain committed to operational excellence and transparency. Corporate speak for, "We just walked into a minefield, and someone's about to get blamed." She read the headline from her phone while still in bed. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Just stared. Then the email started. Subject, urgent, Project Tusk hold. Subject, emergency call, legal review. Subject, did you know about this? She was brushing her teeth when the Slack messages came in. Short, measured, but unmistakably laced with suspicion. "Hey, saw the PR blast. You okay? You were leading implementation, right? Weren't you the one who onboarded the routing logic team?" She didn't answer. Not yet. She needed to get to the office. Fix this in person. By the time she arrived, The glass walls that once made her feel important now felt like they'd been designed for containment. She could see everyone, but the air between them was different. No waves, no smiles. People looked away when she passed their desks. Her badge still worked, but the weight of it around her neck felt heavier than it had 2 days ago. Her boss found her in the break room, pouring stale coffee into a paper cup she didn't want. He didn't mince words. "Why didn't you disclose your connection?" She froze. "What?" "To the platform. To the IP. To him." "I didn't know it was his," she said too quickly. "Jessica," he said quietly, "you signed a spouse disclosure form 2 weeks ago." I don't remember that." He pulled out his phone, tapped, showed her a scanned document with her signature at the bottom. Standard onboarding. Clause 5.6 clearly asks for any known familial or spousal ties to vendors, partners, or entities related to IP under acquisition review. You answered none. She felt her stomach drop. "I didn't think it mattered," she said. "I didn't know he still had anything to do with it. We haven't talked about his work in years." He didn't argue, just looked at her like a man watching something unravel in real time. "The board's freezing all your involvement in internal projects. Effective immediately." "I'm sorry. You can't be serious." "Legal's serious. HR serious. The investors are on fire, Jess. We just had a valuation meeting based on a product we might not legally be allowed to touch. The only reason they're not using words like fraud yet is because we're still investigating." "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, trying to summon the confident voice that used to charm rooms. It came out weak, unsure. "I didn't know what he still had." "But you knew what he was," he said, and that landed like a knife. "You just didn't think he mattered." And then he left her there, half coffee, full panic. By lunch, her calendar had been wiped. Project invites revoked. Slack permissions silently updated. Her access to the Tusk integration board was gone. All internal communications involving the platform now had a new label: restricted, legal review only. And she sat at her desk, surrounded by silence, as the office moved on without her. The woman they praised last week was now a liability no one wanted to touch. Every conversation felt half-muted when she walked by. The intern who used to ask her advice now wouldn't meet her eyes. The HR director gave her a look she couldn't quite read, but it was more pity than concern. And through it all, not one message from him. Not a word. She didn't even know where he was, which, for the first time in their marriage, terrified her. She came through the door like a storm that had lost its thunder. No dramatic slamming, just a quiet shove, keys barely making it onto the hook. Her bag hit the floor with a dull thud, and she stood in the foyer for a beat too long, like she wasn't sure whether she still lived there. I was in the kitchen, French press in one hand, ceramic mug in the other. Calm, measured. The morning light caught the steam rising off the counter like something sacred. She spotted me, and for a moment, her face crumpled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. Not the teary, dramatic kind. The still kind. The kind that only shows up when someone realizes they've pushed too far past the line they didn't bother to see. "What did you do?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I poured my coffee, stirred in a little cinnamon, habit, and took a sip. Then I looked at her, unblinking. "You told him I was just here." Another sip. "So I left." She looked around, like maybe something in the room would confirm that I was bluffing, that the walls were still hers. The rug, the art on the walls, the mahogany bookshelf she had curated piece by piece. But the difference wasn't in the furniture. It was on the table. A folder. Plain. Cream-colored. One of those kinds you find in a notary's office. Labeled, in my handwriting, asset transfers. Her hands didn't move, but her eyes locked on it like it might explode. "I don't understand," she said, voice cracking at the edge. "You wouldn't," I said. "You never asked." She walked over, slow, like she was afraid it might vanish if she blinked. She opened the folder. Read the first page, then the second, then back to the first. Her breath hitched. The house, the car, the investment accounts. My name, and only mine, beneath the trust's controlling entity. A legal restructuring dated 3 months prior, when she first started acting like she was auditioning for a role in someone else's life. "You moved everything?" "Yes." Her hands trembled now. "You can't do that." "I did. But my name's on the—" It was. Until it wasn't. The folder included notarized filings. She recognized my attorney's name. The same man who helped us buy the place. The same man who walked me through Clause 14b, while she was out picking tile samples. "I paid for the down payment," she said, weakly, grasping for ground that didn't exist anymore. "With money from a licensing deal you never asked about." "That's not fair." "Fair would have been honesty." I said, still quiet. Fair would have been not pretending I was your shadow while you played visionary at dinner parties. I never said. You said it with your tone, with your timing, with every time you called me just here in front of someone you wanted to impress. She dropped into a chair, the same one she used to sit in while scrolling job postings, deciding which company would look best on her resume. What happens now, she whispered. That depends. On what? Whether you're finally ready to acknowledge whose name built the floor under your feet. She didn't reply. She just stared at the folder like it had teeth. And in a way it did, because it wasn't just paper. It was the first time she saw, in writing, the consequences of treating me like furniture. The legal reality of what happens when you forget that the quiet ones are still building, even while you're busy performing. The house wasn't hers anymore. Not legally, not emotionally. And now, she finally understood. Silence isn't absence. Sometimes it's planning. By Wednesday, the calls stopped coming. Correction, some calls stopped. The ones from her boss, from HR, from the internal review team. Those slowed to a crawl and then vanished altogether. No updates. No meetings. No invitations to join the emergency all-hands Zoom where everyone but her received next steps. But the one call she did get came from her mother, and it hit harder than any HR memo ever could. I just saw that article. Her mother said, no hello, no pleasantries. Just immediate impact, like a slap through the phone. Is it true? Jessica closed the blinds before answering. Which part? That the software your company tried to buy belonged to your husband. That he filed some legal block and now the deal's frozen. Jessica paced. It's complicated. No, it's not, her mother snapped. You're married. He paid for your MBA. I told you not to take advantage of him back then. Jessica stopped pacing. What are you talking about? Her mother scoffed. Oh, please, Jess. You think I believed you worked 2 jobs and still somehow came out debt-free from Stanford? You think I didn't notice the upgraded apartment? The dinners? The tuition vanishing? You never said how, and I stopped asking because I thought maybe, you finally found someone who supported you. Turns out he did. And you never even asked where the money came from. Jessica said nothing. Her mother exhaled sharply. You wanted a husband who stayed quiet and clapped on cue. Well, you got one. Until he didn't. Then came the click. Dial tone. The next blow was quieter. Her group chat, once buzzing with inside jokes and espresso martini pics, had gone silent. 3 unread messages. All from her. No replies. The last text from anyone else was 5 days ago, before the housewarming party, when she posted a filtered photo of herself in the new office elevator mirror with the caption, Making Moves Rocket. Now, nothing. She opened Instagram. Notifications had slowed to a trickle. Someone had untagged her from a photo at the conference last month. A former co-worker she once mentored posted a story at the team offsite in Lake Tahoe. Jessica hadn't been invited. They'd called it a logistics leadership retreat, and they hadn't even bothered to pretend she was welcome. She scrolled further, found a comment under one of the firm's posts from a well-known vendor in the space. While that a company like this didn't vet its acquisition risks, you'd think someone on the team would have flagged the IP conflicts earlier. No names, but everyone in the industry would know. The logistics world was small. Everyone knew everyone. And the whisper networks? Brutal. One of the devs she used to work with, Ben, soft-spoken guy with a dry sense of humor, had posted a tweet that morning. Funny how the quiet coders always end up being the landmines. Respect the ones who stay building in the background. They own more than you think. It had over 800 likes. Jessica put down her phone and sat in silence. Not the kind that comes with peace, but the kind that wraps around your throat like plastic. The email from legal still sat unread. Subject line, compliance inquiry, access restrictions notice. She couldn't bring herself to open it. Even the walls of the house felt wrong now. Too sterile, too curated. A museum of things she'd chosen, but never really owned. And somewhere inside that house, maybe in the basement, maybe in the attic, maybe buried in a backup drive, was the code she used to laugh at. The one he built late at night, alone, while she told him to take a break, or go do something normal for once. Now that code had taken her job, her reputation, her credibility, and none of her connections were replying to her anymore. She was suddenly, impossibly alone. The kind of alone you can't pretty up with a filter. She wore her best blouse, pressed it twice, matched it with pearl studs and nude heels, silent, professional, forgettable, exactly how HR liked it. The last time she walked into the boardroom dressed like that, it was for her onboarding meeting. Her boss had made a joke about rising stars, and someone from HR had said, "We expect big things." This time, no one joked. The long table stretched out before her like a tribunal. Legal counsel sat at the far end, flanked by HR on one side and the COO on the other. Her boss wasn't at his usual seat. He was off to the side, notepad in hand, not looking up. No one offered coffee. "Jessica," the lawyer began. "Thank you for coming in. This won't take long. No greeting. No chit-chat. Just straight to the kill. We're conducting a compliance review regarding your involvement in Project Tusk. Before we proceed further, we need clarity on one critical point." Jessica nodded, jaw clenched. The lawyer folded her hands. "Did you knowingly influence internal priorities, strategic or technical, while being aware that your spouse had historical or legal ownership ties to the IP being acquired?" Jessica froze. "I didn't know he still owned it," she said carefully. "We're married, but we've been financially separate for years. I haven't seen any statements. I wasn't part of his LLC." "That's not what we asked," the HR rep interrupted, her voice sharp. "We're asking if, at any point, you were aware of his previous or ongoing involvement with the underlying platform." Jessica looked toward her boss. Nothing. No expression. Just notes. She tried again. "He's a developer. He tinkered. But I always assumed he'd moved on. I never saw contracts." "He never." Legal counsel cut in. "You used the term legacy adjacent in multiple internal memos. That's not a term casual observers use. It's technical. It implies familiarity. I picked that up from our vendor meetings." "Did your husband ever discuss the licensing terms with you?" "No." "You sure about that?" "Yes." The lawyer tapped her tablet. A few seconds later, a printed page slid down the table from the HR rep's folder. Slack messages. Highlighted. Jessica stared. Her own words, in gray bubbles. "Let's fast-track this. The vendor's a non-issue. My husband's just a hobbyist who sold some code 1,000,000 years ago. Trust me, this isn't conflict territory. He doesn't even know we're using it." Her chest tightened. She forgot about those. She'd said them quickly, during an evening sprint meeting, trying to impress the CTO and keep momentum going. She never thought those messages would resurface. Not like this. The lawyer waited. "Do you consider those statements appropriate, given what's now been uncovered?" I didn't mean." "We know what you meant," HR said flatly. "That's the issue." Her boss finally spoke, quiet and without emotion. "We're voting to place you on indefinite administrative leave, effective immediately, pending results of the final audit." Jessica blinked. "That's it. We'll update your access permissions within the hour. You'll receive a follow-up notice from HR by the end of day." There were no theatrics. No raised voices. Just process. She stood. No one looked at her. She left the room on legs that no longer felt attached to anything. Back at her desk, her badge still worked, but barely. Access to the internal drive was already revoked. Calendar cleared. Email account disabled. Her laptop screen blinked once, then shut down. She sat, staring at the reflection in the black glass. No tears. Just the echo of her own words, now weaponized against her. "He's just a hobbyist." The line that undid her career. One Slack message at a time. She had tried to erase him with casual words. Now the company had returned the favor with clinical ones. The box on her desk was too small for what she'd brought into this place, but far too large for what she was leaving with. A few framed photos, cropped smiles that now looked like lies. A cracked mug that said "Boss Babe" in pink cursive. 2 pens she'd stolen from HR's desk without meaning to. The rest was digital, and that had already been wiped. She moved mechanically. No flair, no final words. Just the dull rustle of resignation papers folding into cardboard. No one said goodbye? Not really. A few glanced her way when she passed, but quickly returned to their monitors like she was contagious. She couldn't blame them. There's only so long you can keep standing next to a house while it burns and not smell like smoke. She turned the corner near the lobby and caught sight of the front window. Floor-to-ceiling glass, once a symbol of openness, now a one-way mirror into her humiliation. Outside, standing like he had all the time in the world, was her husband, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders square, head tilted slightly like he was watching a slow-motion train derail. He didn't wave. He didn't move. Just waited. She froze. He hadn't contacted her once since that night in the kitchen. No calls. No texts. Not even to gloat. And yet, somehow, she knew this wasn't accidental. He knew she'd be here today. He probably knew the exact time she'd be walking out. And now, there he was. Behind her, footsteps. Her boss approached, phone pressed to his ear. She turned just enough to watch it unfold. He was mid-call, nodding, his brow furrowed. Then came the pause. The kind that only happens when the other line delivers something too sharp to miss. He slowly turned to the glass. Saw him. Recognition hit like a wave. You could see it in his eyes. The exact second he realized the quiet, polite man his star employee had brushed off as just here had been everywhere all along. The man he thought was a harmless +1 was the architect of the platform, the owner of the IP, the reason their 6-month deal was in shambles, and the ghost behind every panicked investor call since Monday. Her boss dropped his hand slowly, phone still open. His face turned the color of wet cement. Outside, her husband didn't smirk, didn't gesture, just stared. The silence between them cut deeper than any last word ever could. And then, after a long, brutal beat, he turned and walked away. Not fast, not triumphant, just done. The glass held the afterimage of him for a moment longer. She stood there, clutching her cardboard box with both hands, breath caught behind her ribs, surrounded by a company that no longer wanted her, and a career she could no longer salvage. No scandal, no headlines, just a soft, devastating erasure. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. He had built quietly, and then, just as quietly, dismantled everything around her with a single clause and one look through the glass.